Story 1: The Man at the Window. It was a rainy Tuesday in October when my secondary school went into lockdown for the first time in my life. I was in year 10, sitting in English class, when the head teacher's voice came through the intercom. "This is a lockdown. Please follow procedure." The room went silent. Our teacher, Mrs. Daniels, locked the door and told us to move to the far corner, away from the windows. The blinds were pulled down, and we sat there in uneasy silence, listening to the rain pattering against the glass. At first, we thought it was just a drill. But drills didn't usually happen during lessons, and Mrs. Daniels looked pale. About 10 minutes in, we heard footsteps outside in the corridor, slow, deliberate footsteps. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They passed our classroom, then stopped. The sound of someone jiggling the door handle made every hair on my arm stand up. Mrs. Daniels mouthed at us to stay quiet. The handle stopped moving, but then came a faint tapping on the window behind us. My heart pounded. I didn't want to look, but my eyes moved on their own. A man was standing outside, staring in through a gap in the blinds. His face was pale, wet from the rain, his eyes wide and unblinking. He lifted his hand and tapped the glass again, slowly, like he wanted us to know he had all the time in the world. Mrs. Daniels reached for her phone to call the office, but before she could, the man moved away. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Eventually, the lockdown was lifted, and police officers arrived to check the premises. They never told us who the man was, or how he'd gotten onto school grounds in the first place. Story 2: The Second Voice. In 2018, my college in Manchester had a lockdown after reports of a suspicious person in the area. I was in the library with about 20 other students. The librarian locked the doors and told us to hide between the tall shelves. We sat there whispering nervously until the voice came over the intercom. "Lockdown is over. Please return to your classrooms." Everyone began to stand up, but the librarian frowned. She told us to wait. A minute later, the real announcement came, this time from the head teacher, saying the lockdown was still in place. We were to remain hidden. We all froze. If the first announcement wasn't from the head teacher, who had made it? The intercom crackled again, but this time there was no voice, just heavy breathing. It lasted for maybe 10 seconds before cutting out. No one moved after that. When the police arrived, they searched the school from top to bottom. They said they hadn't found anyone inside, but the caretaker swore he'd locked the control room earlier that day. The only way to use the intercom was from inside that room. Story 3: The Silent Corridor. This happened in 2016 when I was in year 8. Our school was in a small town, and lockdowns were rare. The alarm went off just after lunch. At first, I thought it was the fire alarm until I noticed the teachers pulling students into classrooms instead of sending us outside. I was in the corridor when it happened, and a teacher quickly ushered me into an empty classroom. The lights were switched off, and the door was locked. There were only 3 of us inside, the teacher, me, and a boy from another class. We crouched low and waited. About 10 minutes later, we heard footsteps in the hall. They were slow, deliberate, and didn't sound like the heavy boots of our site manager. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. We could see a shadow under the gap, the outline of someone standing perfectly still. Then came the sound of fingernails scratching down the door. It was slow, steady, like they were trying to see if we'd make a noise. The teacher whispered for us not to move. We stayed frozen until the scratching stopped and the shadow moved away. When the lockdown was over, the head teacher said it had been triggered by a security concern in the area. But no one explained the scratching or why some students swore they'd seen a tall man walking through the playground before the alarm went off.